Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast today. Um, my guest today is Nancy Bebec of Prestige Tile and Stone, based in Portland, Oregon. So, welcome, Nancy. Happy to have you
Thank
here
you.
today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about Nancy's business out there, Prestige Tile and Stone. Um, get a little bit of information about their history, how long they've been in business, what the background and how she got into this business, and then we'll talk a little bit about the what's going on today with the business and challenges, pros and cons of working in the field that they are in, and then we'll try to wrap things up and talk a little bit about some of the pain points that the businesses might be experiencing, the marketplace, what it's like right now, and see where they're going to go from here, where they'd like to go over the next few years. So, Nancy, if you could start out by just giving us a little bit of history on how you got started with Prestige Tile and Stone.
Absolutely. So again, thank you for having me be part of this. Prestige Tile and Stone began I'd like to say 2010 because that's when we became an incorporated company, but I really started hitting the pavement in 2008. And at that point, I really, I I feel like most people, when they get into business, it's commercial business in Oregon, I would say, is a tough market to kind of navigate through. And so I went the residential route, got myself involved in the homeowners association, became very involved in that because they said if I was an active member, other members would use us. And gosh darn, I was an active member and no member used me. So I was able to, I'm a pretty good networker, and I was going to an event, and this event was for general contractors. And when I was introducing myself, all of them said, "Oh, well, are you a co-bid, which means certified Office of Business Inclusion and Diversity." And that is for the state of Oregon, you're a minority contractor. So they said, well, are you a COVID firm? And I had no idea what they were referencing. And I just said, I'll find out if I am or not, because I didn't want to say no. And but that's kind of that meeting really opened up the door for me getting into the commercial side of things. And so that was 2010. So from 2010 up until now, it would be fair to say that we've been in business for 15 years. And then I think another part of your question is how did we get started? We got started, my son, who was a union tile setter in Portland, very talented tile setter in Portland. His father, who I am not married to anymore, but his father and I sat him down and we said, listen, if you want to try and make a business out of what you're doing, why don't you do that? And as a 22-year-old kid, it was like, oh, yeah, okay, great, I'll be a business owner. And so I just kind of took a step back, and it was a natural assumption that my ex-husband would partner up with him because, still that mindset of men in construction. And I really didn't know any women in construction. I didn't even know the construction industry whatsoever. But so my ex-husband and my son started dabbling in it, but things were not panning through. And so I told my son, I said, listen, why don't you work with a lot of guys on your job? And at this time, he's still a union setter. I said, you work with a lot of guys. Why don't you ask someone if they're interested in partnering up with you? And then kind of in a joking, sarcastic manner, I said, and if you can't, then I will do it. And never thinking that my son would take that one sentence seriously. But a week later, he said, Mom, I can't find anyone. Can you be my partner? And, I'm not going to turn my son down. So I was very hesitant. My background is, I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't have any business training. I didn't have any construction know-how. But I did know that my son had talent, and I knew that I had to do this. So I studied our contractor's manual. Thank goodness it was an open book test because I never would have been able to pass that test. I studied hard, but it was just so foreign. All of the verbiage, I'd never heard it before. And I passed it, and that's how, then started going to the networking meetings and at meetings, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Okay. So your business in tile and stone, I imagine that you do a lot of subcontracting for general contractors. Is that correct?
We do that. Those are my customers. I'm not a fan of doing residential work. So we definitely, that's not something that we do. So our customers are general contractors, and I'm very blessed to work with contractors that are nationwide. And some of your audience might know these names, some of them might not, but we are on a significant job right now with a company called Skanska. And they are around the world, a
Right.
contractor around the world, and they have a very strong presence here in Oregon. Another contractor that at least United States I know is J.E. Dunn, Turner Construction. Um, those three big names, we are a sub for quite a few of their jobs. And then the big guys that are here in Portland that might not be nationwide, but they're very large. And one of them is called Fortis Construction, and one of them is called Hoffman's Construction. And we do a lot of work for them also. And you know what? We do work for mid-sized guys too. We're
Sure.
not too high on the hill that we would pass up anything. A job is a job, and especially right now.
Right. It sounds like the co-bid is very similar. In Virginia, we have what's called SWAM, which is small woman-owned and minority contractors. So it sounds like it's a similar type of classification, which here in Virginia on government projects, the uh, the general contractors are required to have a certain percentage of SWAM subcontractors. And I imagine it's the same out there. Like if they're doing a job for a university or something like that.
That's it right there. They're definitely the same, just different acronyms.
Right, exactly. Right. Um, so I imagine a lot of your work is generated through word of mouth and repeat work with general contractors too.
Oh, well, you know, no.
No?
Well, I mean, word of mouth in that I network with a lot of these guys, and let's use Skanska as an example. So Skanska, a big company, big presence here in Portland. There's a rotation of people, and that's not good and it's not bad. It just is the reality of it. And so, with a rotation of people, I have to always be networking to these guys because, out of
Right,
sight, out of mind.
right.
So, unless you're like really, I remember when I first got in into this. And one of the guys from Skanska asked me if I wanted to go to, I can't remember the name that he called it, but it was for their 40 top select contractors. And he said, one day you are going to be part of this meeting. And I thought, oh, that's okay. That's cool. But these are guys that have, they've been in construction here in Portland for, a lot of them like over 30 years, over 40 years. And even though I'd like to think 15 years, that shows longevity. There's
Right.
contractors here that have a lot more years underneath me. And so, those guys are the ones that are cemented in with these guys. I'm still trying to navigate that and figure out how I can get that to happen for us. It happened.
Gotcha. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your role in the day-to-day operations of Prestige Tile and Stone?
Yeah, when my son asked me to become a partner, he I said, "Well, what does that look like?" And he said, "Well, you'll go out and, do the marketing." And I thought, great, because again, if I do have a strength that serves me, it is my networking strength. And so I thought that I would be going to parties all the time and talking all the time. And that did happen for a while. But once we started getting on city and state work and county work and the schools, the amount of paperwork and items that are needed that we have to have in before we can even step on site, it's really overwhelming. And then
Right.
not just that, it's when we're on that type of job, there are mandated reports that have to be turned in, and it's very time consuming. So it started out, I was the marketing person. I was the, let's say, quote unquote, the face of Prestige Tile and Stone. Now, last night I did go to a networking event and I enjoy them so much, but a lot of my networking is done via phone, and I'll just call someone up and say, "Hey, we haven't talked for a while. What do you got going down the pipeline?" But so in answer to your question, it's a lot of paperwork for right now.
Okay. How about the finances? The finances, is that something that falls under you as well?
Oh
Are
yeah.
you watching the books
Yeah.
and all that?
I would say, yeah, the office side of things, there's so many tasks involved because I don't want to make this long and lengthy, but let's just say we get a bid invite. And before we even get that bid invite, I've probably talked to someone. So I've either gone to an event, gone to a meeting, called them up on the phone, not all the time, because, these guys, it's not like, oh, well, they do have prestige in their Rolodex, but
Hmm.
I am constantly working on that. But so you get a bid invite and we're looking to see if there's even tile on there, because a lot of these new people out there, they say they see ceiling tile and they think that Christie Tile and Stone does ceiling tile. So I've got to make sure that everything that I put on our Excel project list, which is a lifeline between my estimator who lives in California and myself and my son up here in Oregon. I have to make sure that the jobs that I put up there are, they're not wasting my estimator's time. So, we look through the plans, and if there is tile, then we help our estimator get material costs. That's time consuming. There's a lot of times we've got bid forms that have to be filled out. Then let's just say we do get the job. And once you get the job, then you have to go back and reach out to the vendors again to get samples of the material so that the architect will know that you have bid the correct material. And
Right.
it's a lot, the insurance, getting all of that information over. And I say it's a lot, and I've been saying it several times, but with no complaints. I love doing it.
How much help do you have right there in the home office?
Well, I actually have an office, but I came home. But I do have a full-time girl that helps me.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of working with close family members? How's that
Ugh.
dynamic?
It's interesting because when I first knew that I was going to get myself in this role, I reached out to a couple people that I knew were in family businesses, and I tried to get information from them. And they told me, well, it's difficult. And to be quite honest, I thought, well, how difficult could it be? It's your family, and it's difficult. And I don't know. I even think for myself, because this is my son, and I know married couples that are in construction. And I think, oh my gosh, that's a whole other level. And I'm glad I'm not part of that, because at least my son can go to his home. I can go to my home. Where if they were a married couple, I don't know. Maybe have to get an apartment to, spend some time by myself, but it's very difficult. And my son and I have ups and downs for sure. But when you take all of that away, we are on board with the things that are most important. And we both have very strong work ethics. We both are aggressive and go-getters. And we both lead with integrity. And I think that if we weren't a match like that, then, those other things could probably break us. But because we are so suited well with the foundational parts of things, I hate to say it because this is my son, but like a married couple, you have your ups and downs. My son and I have our ups and downs, but it's difficult for sure.
Do you find that it's easy to be open with your son when you're talking about business issues? Maybe
Y-
are you
y-
more comfortable talking about those things with him than you might be with someone who's not a relative, or does it make it even harder?
You know, well, that's a great question. I feel like my communication and is is very good. So I don't feel that it is hard. And I don't know if it would be different with someone that was not my son. That's a hard question to answer. I'm not sure.
That's fair. That's fair. Um, so what do you see in the market these days? How's the market out there for your business and for construction in general?
Well, during COVID, which when that happened, we thought that it would really put a damper on things. And instead, it did the exact opposite. And we actually ended up having our best years in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and 2023. And then I would say about mid part of 2024, things kind of like went down. And meaning we weren't getting bid invites like we had gotten in the past. There's a newspaper that I subscribe to that I read daily that, it was like, this job is going to not go on. And so just went out there, started asking my GCs. I'm like, what's going on? And they all said the same thing. And what they said is that if you can get through 2025, that things will be up to speed in 2026. So that's kind of been what we've been doing. We've just been quote unquote chugging along. We had a substantial backlog, and if you're unfamiliar with backlog, but it's just a list of jobs. It's jobs that you have, like there's a job in our backlog right now. It's not going to go on until summer 2026, but you always want to build your backlog.
Right.
And so our backlog was getting really minimal. And, again, my son and I are both aggressive. So what we have done is we've reached out to floor covering shops and said, hey, do you have any work going on? Um, and we've reached out to general contractors and we've said, hey, if there's something that you got and we can give you just like, a cost cost for it and, like minimal markup, is that an option? And I've had several guys respond to that. Now, again, we were and are extremely lucky because we had landed, and I am going to give the co-bid, which I'm a minority in construction. I landed this job due to that certification. And it was our first very large job. And so that has held us over. And so we're probably not going to feel the effects of our minimal backlog until maybe February or March, but it's October, and so we're hustling to get the bids out there so that, maybe we can ramp it up and it's not going to be as detrimental as I think. But, I do talk to others and they all say the same thing. The work is sparse. And another thing with tile sometimes is looked at as a luxury for some of the buildings. And
Okay.
so if an owner is going to cut costs, a lot of times they take the tile out.
Okay.
And that's what we do. We're tile and stone. So, there's been that effect. But, we were awarded a a substantial job. So the job that we're on right now, it's for a hospital, and they were also going to build another building, and we landed that job. So we're like, oh, well, that's cool. We're gonna end this first building for the hospital, and we're gonna just walk over and start doing the second building for the hospital. Well, the general contractor called us up and said, due to funding, they are taking it off the table. So it was like, it was a bummer, and it was a good sized job. So, but I mean, it is what it is. You just get back to bidding more.
Right. Now, so that hospital job, that's an example of a project that you do. You do universities as well. What are some other, you know, project types that you work on besides the hospital?
Yeah. So our probably top, I am very grateful. We do a lot of jobs that have significance, I guess, is what you want to say. I'm not quite sure. High profile, but probably our highest profile job is out at the Portland airport. And that had so much hype in Portland. And we were actually awarded an award of excellence from the chamber in the Portland area for this project. It was a big thing. So, The Portland Airport, University of Oregon, Oregon State, we're out at some libraries, a lot of libraries, we're wrapping up. Police departments. Mm, Gosh, it kind of in that realm, right?
Okay.
I don't have my list in front of me to like just pinpoint it, but yeah, so we do that style. We like that style. We like the general contractors that work those jobs. It's kind of um, a different experience out in the field when you're working that style of job with a big general contractor versus working, and I'm trying to think of something offhand, but let's say working at a Target for a mid-size. They're both jobs that we would take, but it's just they're very different.
Okay. Um, so obviously you're facing challenges just in workload available workload out there right now. But if you get through that, where do you see the company being, say, 2, 3 years down the road?
I like that question because my son and I have been doing a lot of planning for that. And what we are going to do is add another department, and we're going to get into epoxy flooring and cement flooring. Portland is a very green lead state.
Right.
And so they do a lot of cement floors, and there's guys out here, obviously, but I mean, if we can, our goal is not to be, do a whole job that's cement, but there's a lot of jobs out there that have cement floors or epoxy floors and then some tile. And so we'd like to kind of add that, to
Okay.
our to what we're doing right now. So that's one component. And then we are going to, in our industry, there is I guess it would be a certification. I'm not quite sure if that's the right word, but it's an acknowledgement in our industry that we are top of the line, a top tier contractor. And in Oregon, there is no commercial contractor that is at that level. And I already have a couple guys that are certified installers, which helps make this process a little easier. So we are going to start the process of becoming, it's called a 5-star contractor. And it's going to help because right now, some of these guys, we're on a federal job. We're at a park over in the state of Washington, and they wanted to make sure that we were a five star sub or a trial of excellence, which trial of excellence is all union related. We are an open shop, which means we are not union. And so I sent over the guys that have CTI certifications. I sent over that information, and the federal guy was not taking it. He's like, no, Anyway, long story short, it just made me aware that things might be a little bit easier for the style of jobs that we like if we have this that we can just use, and then it won't be an issue. So that's those two things. I know that they'll be complete in 2 to 3 years, and that's going to take us to another level.
Okay. That sounds great. Are there any like business metrics that you're focused on right now on improving internally?
Business methods. Give me an
Metrics.
example what you mean by that.
Metrics, just like your numbers. Yeah, are there any
Oh,
numeric goals or anything like that that you're really focused on, whether it's some kind of efficiency or just your profit margins on projects, anything like that?
well, I'm always focused on that.
Sure.
That 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 does not go away. But I am diligent. And it's funny too, because my dad was a bookkeeper by trade, and never in a million years would I have envisioned myself doing bookkeeping for my company, but that's what I do. I do it all myself. And so, I'm very diligent in getting in all of my information. We look at our jobs daily, especially long jobs. And we've put some guys in the role of being in charge, and as much as they think, oh, well, that's great, there's a lot of responsibility in getting them on that job with a crew and getting them off of that job and making sure that they have reached the numbers. So, my son and I work with these guys that we have put in that role. We work pretty close with them, and we provide them the information so that we're all transparent about it, and they need to know what that number is. They need to hit that number. But as far as like, do we wiggle? Are you saying like when we give out proposals before we've even won the job, are we shortening our profit margin? Is that what you're asking?
Well, not necessarily, but are you, really, is there a particular focus like on your prop? Is there a particular number that you're trying to reach on
Oh,
your,
yeah. Oh, I gotcha. We shoot for 10%.
okay?
Yeah. Now, knock on wood, we've we have been we've been doing over that. But it's because uh we just have to be. I mean, I'm not in this business to like just pussyfoot around. I'm in here to take care of the guys that I employ, and I'm in here to make sure that this company is running well and no creaks. And unfortunately in construction, that I get it. I understand. I've just always when I got into construction, I had no money, none whatsoever. I had to borrow money from my ex-husband. And then we landed a job, and my ex-husband said, I can't loan you any money anymore. And so I went to a guy that I had met at a networking meeting. And honestly, I did not know what this was, but he was a guy that loaned people money. And okay, I mean, I needed money. I needed to get this job. I didn't, it was such a foreign world to me, but I just remember the day I had 30 days and I was supposed to start paying him back. And I remember on day 30, I got a call in the morning and he's like, it's time to pay me my money. And I'm like, I don't even have it, because most of the time I don't get paid until 60 days. So 30 days, like, what am I going to do? So I went and I told the general contractor, and he's like, don't ever do that again. And so they paid me so that I could get this guy free. I learned my lesson from that. Never would I do that again, ever. So I have been very diligent about saving my pennies. And I'm proud of that, to be honest, because there's some subcontractors that's not their story. But for me, I want to be a financially healthy contractor. And so far in 15 years, I've been able to succeed.
Very good. We're running a little short on time. I've got one last, which hopefully might be a quick question. If you had one major challenge today, what would that be? What would you say your biggest challenge is?
But the biggest challenge right now is the lack of work,
Okay.
without a doubt. when we got in this in 2008, 2010, my son and I would drive around and we'd just open up. I don't even think there were, I don't even know how we got the names. I think there were telephone books back then. And I'd look, contractors, and we'd get their address and I'd go drive over there. This is a true story. We'd go over there and they were closed. They were, they were out of business. Now, then when we started getting work, I just thought, wow, okay. And everyone kept saying, well, it's not as bad as 2008. And they were right. It's not, as work progressed over the years, it was, it just kept getting better and better to me. So, but I never had the experience, because when you start out, when it's bad, you don't have any history to remember. Now I have history to remind myself, and I can remember what it was like in 2008. And so I remind myself that, well, at least this time, general contractors are not closing down like they were. So there's that, that little nugget, I guess. But the lack of work is definitely something that I'm, crossing my fingers with all the information I've been told that will turn around, and I'm going to put my eggs in a basket on that one.
Okay, Nancy, we're going to have to wrap up here, but I appreciate your
Sounds
time
good.
today. And
I appreciate your question.
all right. Thanks again, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay.